What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with a breaking news episode on this Sunday night. And we have some more news regarding the coaching carousel in college football, as the Washington Huskies have reportedly fired head coach Jimmy Lake, looking to make a move this offseason, as we've already seen multiple teams go ahead and insert their programs in this really large coaching carousel this offseason. We've seen USC, I mean, you've seen LSU, USC, a bunch of these other schools already do this. Washington is the latest school to do this. This was first reported by Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports, and it comes one day after Washington's loss to Arizona State this weekend. And this is a game that Lake was already suspended from, could not coach after being suspended for physically shoving a player the weekend before on the sidelines against Oregon. Now, this opened up the opportunity for Washington to fire Lake with calls, which means they could potentially get out from under that buyout. Well, according to all sources, Lake will not be fired for calls, which means he will be paid the remainder of his buyout by the Huskies, which nears almost $10 million. As it comes out to roughly $9.9 million, which will be paid monthly over the next 3 seasons. So Washington will be paying Jimmy Lake not to be their head coach for 3 years after this, in total almost $10 million lost. Now, Lake came in as the head coach for the Huskies less than 2 seasons ago, as he took over for legendary head coach Chris Peterson, and did not even see the end of his second season. This only gives him about 13, 14 games as the head coach for the Huskies. And last season, 3-1, finished first in the Pac-12 North. COVID decimated the first season for Jimmy Lake, and they still find a way to win the division. But then COVID just wreaked havoc on this program, knocked them out of the championship game, which ended up being won by their division rival in Oregon. Now this year, 4-5, 3-3 in the Pac-12 thus far, and that started out horribly. A loss to an FCS powerhouse in Montana, 13-7, followed by a 31-10 blowout loss to Michigan in the Big House the week after. Since then, Washington has been 2-4 over their last 6 games, including a 10-point loss to division rival Oregon last week. Now, Lake first arrived in Seattle in 2004, in which he served as the DB coach for 1 year before leaving for Montana State in 2005. Now, he ultimately returned to the Huskies in 2014 as the DB coach again, became the co-defensive coordinator in 2016, and got the full-time gig in 2018. And for multiple years, it was known that he was really the head coach in waiting. Then, once Peterson announced his departure, Jimmy Lake was announced the full-time head coach in 2020. Now, he spent time at Eastern Washington as a graduate assistant and a DB coach, has spent time at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the assistant DB coach and the official DB coach, along with the Detroit Lions for a year, Boise State's DB coach and position group coach. So he has already had major experience all across the country in terms of head coaching experience. And he's one of the best defensive minds in college football. And he has done such a great job recruiting the DB spot year after year. You see these top DBs come from the Huskies, and that's mostly due to Jimmy Lake and his recruiting. Now, what went wrong is, I've already told you, man, this year was a tough year. The loss to Montana, the blowout to Michigan, the big loss to Oregon, all kind of culminated in some on the field woes. And usually that wouldn't be enough to let a head coach go this soon. But when you combine that with the off the field accusations and trouble that he's had in terms of how he treats his players, and I'm not going to get into what side I'm on or anything like that, but there was a lot of pushback from boosters, donors, and the top people in this organization that really didn't like all the bad media that Washington was getting, based on Lake being accused of shoving players, and in the way he treats them on and off the field apparently was being scrutinized. When you combine that with the poor performance on the field this season for Washington, in which they're coming off a division title, it really just culminated in his termination this afternoon. Now, I want to move on to the top candidates to replace Lake at Washington. Now, it's still early. This news came out literally just a few hours ago, but based on all reports, I got three names here that are definitely going to be in consideration that I think would be great potential candidates to replace Jimmy Lake at Washington. The first being Dave Aranda, currently serving as the Baylor head coach, has a 10-9 overall record in 2 seasons. And, he is a new head coach. Like I said, only his second season at Baylor, but Aranda is going to be one of the hottest coaching candidates on the market for the success he's already having at Baylor, in which they're coming off a huge top 8 upset over Oklahoma, will probably find themselves in the top 10 this week in the college football playoff potentially. And on top of that, he's one of the best defensive minds in college football. You look at what he did as the defensive coordinator at Hawaii, at Utah State, at Wisconsin, and at LSU, in which he was a key part to that national championship run that they made in 2019, having the defense, shut down Trevor Lawrence in that Clemson offense and Lincoln Riley's offense in the playoffs that year as well in the semifinals. And the biggest selling point for Aranda is he has those coast titles you want. He was born in California. He's coached at the high school level. He's coached at Southern Utah. He's coached at Hawaii. He's coached at Utah State. And he also has the national recruiting presence to get players from all over the country. Recruiting on the West Coast is such a unique thing because not only do you have to be able to protect the West Coast kids that need to come to your school, you got to be able to recruit locally. You also have to reach out nationally and try to get some players from the Georgias to Floridas to Texases, the Ohios, those top recruiting pipeline states. And Aranda's time in the SEC and in the Big Ten is going to allow him to do that. Now, the thing with Washington is they definitely want a head coach with those West Coast ties. That's the number one thing they want because they know being all the way up there in Seattle, you have to do it. But also, Washington has prided itself on being a defensive minded program. And so the fact that these ties for Aranda tie him to be one of the best defensive minds in the country, everyone just saw him shut down Lincoln Riley for the third consecutive time, made Caleb Williams and Spencer Rattler look inept at quarterback. You have to give Dave Aranda his props and give him, and give him his not only just his props, but maybe an opportunity to take over a bigger program than what he has at Baylor. Now, the biggest thing is he's getting paid about $4 million a year in Waco, so you're probably going to have to pay him about $6 million a year to make it worth it to move from Baylor with all the success he's having. And Aranda's made his money down south over the past few seasons. So can Washington convince Aranda to take over Washington? Now, the biggest thing for Aranda is he goes up to Washington. You give him all the resources to be a top 3 Pac-12 program almost immediately, and you have the defensive pieces around there. You're going to have to fix some things offensively, but the number one thing Aranda's done at Baylor, really, their offense has been great this season with Bohannon, with Abram Smith at the running back spot, Tyquan Thornton at wide receiver. So for me, I think Aranda's proven that even though he's a defensive minded head coach, he knows how to surround himself with the proper offensive personnel. And that's something that some of these defensive minded head coaches really struggle to do in college football. So for me, Aranda is going to be a top prospect for this job moving forward. Also, Kalen Dieber at Fresno State, the head coach there, has a 78-9 overall record. He was 67-3 at Sioux Falls in 5 seasons and is 11-6 at Fresno State going into his second season. Now, you know, Kalen's going to be an interesting prospect due to his mostly because he's had a very successful time winning and having success with lesser talent, and going to a program like Washington could give him a chance to show what he can do with talent on the Power 5 level in the Pac-12 at one of the top programs that has all the resources, all the finances, the facilities, everything you need is there for you. And this is a guy who is a 3-time NAIA national championship winner, 2006, 7, and 8. Also a 3-time NAIA coach of the year, and also a 4-time GPAC conference championship winner from '06 to '09. That is the type of winner you're bringing in. You saw Kansas, even though Leipold was successful on another level. They bring him in and they're having major success already with a big upset win over Kansas. And you look at Kansas State going after a North Dakota State head coach in Chris Kleiman, and they're having some strong success as well. So I think that matters. Being able to win at any level you coach in is impressive. And then also Fresno State was a top 15 team earlier this season, and he has really made an impact in terms of what he can do with lesser talent. You look at the offensive talent he has. There's multiple people on that offense that are probably going to go to the NFL draft. The defense has been stingy and flying around the field, and the number one thing is how hard his team plays for him. Getting kids to play hard for you week in and week out is the number one thing for a head coach, and that's why I think DeBoer has one of the best shots at this job. And for me, yes, like I said, his experience is at a lower level, but he's only making about 1.3 million a year at Fresno State. So Washington could easily pay him, and the buyout's not going to be very big. And he's only 47 now. I think Washington, you see this trend of going younger and younger at coaching to inject your program with some energy. I think Jabor is going to be someone that you really have to strongly consider, especially with his success at Fresno State this season. Now, the third candidate, man, this one's a stretch, but I think this would be a one of the grand slam hires for Washington in terms of manageable prospects that you can get, and that's Kalani Sitake at BYU, a 46 and 28 overall record over 6 seasons for the Cougars, and he is another West Coast candidate that has a long track record of success with lesser talent and exceeding expectations year in and year out for the Cougars. And really and truly, the number one thing he's done, he's created some sort in, and I wouldn't call it NFL pop, a full blown NFL pipeline, but he's sent kids to the league every single year but one at his time out of Provo. And they had 5 different players become NFL draft picks last season, including 2 in the first 3 rounds and the number 2 pick in the draft in Zach Wilson. And that's something that I know Washington wants to have happen is continue to send their players to the NFL and also recruit at a high level. And Satake has done that at BYU. Now they're 19 and 3 over the past 2 seasons, including their surprise 11 and 1 run last season, in which they reached the top 10, and they were borderline top 10 until they lost to Baylor earlier this season. He has ties to the Big 12. He spent most of his career out west. He's a Kyle Whittingham disciple or from that coaching tree. And Kyle Whittingham has been one of the best Pac 12 coaches over the past few years. So Washington can reach out, get a young up and coming prospect. He's only 46. He's done great things at BYU, and bringing him to Washington, increasing his resources, his recruiting budget, the facilities could do huge things for this program. And so I think this is an underrated hire. It might not be a splash hire where everyone's like, "Oh my lord, man, look at who they hired." I think he has plenty of years ahead of him. I think the coaching tree he comes from is extremely successful, and I think what he's shown he's able to do with a little bit of lesser talent could really be a selling point for Washington. But these are 3 names right now that I'm hearing are going to be involved in the coaching search, and they're the 3 candidates that I really feel like have a great shot at being the next head coach at Washington. And I will keep you guys updated on all the latest coaching search updates for Washington. Now, quickly, how does this impact the remainder of the season? Defensive coordinator, linebacking coach Bob Gregory was named the interim head coach today. He has major experience within the program, over 8 years as the linebacker coach, and he's currently in the midst of his first year at defensive coordinator. They have a game traveling to Colorado this weekend, and they also play Washington State, of course, in the big rivalry game, for the state of Washington on the 26th. For me, if you can get a win, I think Washington is still probably a better team than Colorado. I mean, I think realistically, the expectations are you still should finish 2-0. Washington State also lost their head coach, so that won't be an excuse. And if you can finish 2-0 and finish on the upswing for Washington, that would be a solid end to your season. You will give yourself a bit of momentum, even with this coaching search, to go into next year with some confidence. The worst case, of course, 0-2, man, you cannot lose to Colorado and then lose to your biggest rival in Washington State. You have to, I think for me, The ideal plan would be 2-0. I think no less than 1-1. But that Washington State game is looming large. That's a game that Gregory and this team need to win just for in terms of program morale all throughout the building. So that's kind of my expectations for the remainder of the season. Y'all comment below and let me know. And then also, everyone always asks, what's the impact of recruiting? Right now, Washington has a top 60 class. The only recruit that has a confirmed comment right now is four-star Jeremy Bernard, the 211th overall player, number 30 wide receiver. He's the highest rated recruit in this class. And he said, quote, with head coach Jimmy Lake getting fired, nothing has changed for me because my position coach, which is Junior Adams, is still there. If anything changes, it would be because my position coach left, and I don't see that happening. So keeping Junior Adams on the staff could be huge for the Huskies and keeping their highest rated recruit up to this point. No other comments from recruits have been released. There's been reports that a lot of recruits just need time to process this change. This only happened a few hours ago, and that recruits are going to wait out to see how the staff moves play out and who emerges the top candidate for this job moving forward. But a lot of these recruits right now remain locked in. Washington has a lot of work to do, but I would imagine just like Texas Tech and Baylor we saw this week, they're going, or I mean, with Texas Tech hiring a Baylor assistant, they're going to try to move fast. That way they can have some plan in place ahead for early signing day. And also, one of their top Pac 12 competitors at USC is also looking for a coach. I would imagine Washington is going to try to move quickly, just like everybody else in the country. So that's the latest on this Washington head coaching search. That's the latest on Jimmy Lake being let go from the Huskies, man. Comment below your thoughts on this move. Comment below on some of the candidates I listed, and also comment just your overall thoughts on the situation and what you guys might be hearing, man. I would love to hear from y'all. Hope y'all have a great Sunday night, man. Got to bring this breaking news episode, so make sure to turn on your post notifications. Make sure to subscribe, comment your thoughts below. And if you want exclusive Blue Bloods content, make sure to hit that join button right up there by the subscribe button. But for right now, man, y'all have a great Sunday night, and we are out.